Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends. Good evening to everyone, and welcome to Kardec Radio. I am Correa, and we are here every Tuesday and Eastern Standard Time to study together the constitution of our souls. What shall be the constitution of our souls? These are the divine laws that God has imprinted into our divine DNA and archived in the deepest recesses of our conscience. Inside of us, within voice that tells us through intuition what most helps us in our evolution, the choices that we make with eternal repercussions for our well-being. And that same voice also tells us when we need to readjust our pathway. In other words, all of us have an internal divine, those are the divine laws. God is so loving that treating us as beloved children, God has granted us all the same rights: the right to have free will, the right to choose our pathway, and at the same time, the right to access the divine code, the code that shall lead us towards immortal. We at Kardec Radio would like and do invest in our immortal well-being every single day. We are here together to study these very laws. Those laws have been presented to us by Allan Kardec through his beautiful efforts. He organized a section of the Spirit's book, the third section, to important moral ethical laws. So now we shall continue our study by focusing tonight on question 885, which is cataloged under the law of love, justice, and charity. So what we will do, beloved friends, is the following. We will read the question and answer, comment, bring an exercise that can help us to feel the scriptures and practice it, and then we shall close our study together. So knowing that the mentors of Kardec Radio and our individual mentors lovingly count on us to share our crumbs of love with those who are in greater need than we are. And also spared this educational moment for us, we now ask them for permission to begin our study. And let us then turn our attention to the Spirit's book and read together question 885. In this question, Kardec asks, are property rights unlimited? The answer is as follows. Undoubtedly, everything that has been legitimately acquired is property. But as we have said, human legislation, imperfect as it is, frequently sanctions conventional rights that are opposite to natural justice. This is why humankind reform their laws and as they better understand justice. What is perfect in one century seems barbaric in the next. Yes, beloved friends, God's wisdom guides us all. So while human justice evolves and progresses as we ourselves evolve and progress, divine law remains the same. This is why it's important to aim at understanding this immortal and eternal constitution of our souls, because that way we don't get citations in the book of our own very lives. And it is interesting that the spirit mentors bring to our attention this dichotomy, the very fact that human justice often opposes divine justice. What the spirit natural justice is in fact divine justice. Why is there such an opposition? Because as the spirit mentors explained, what we consider perfect in one century seems barbaric in the next. Let us illustrate with a particular example. If we go back to the book 2,000 years ago and 50 years later by Xavier, we come to learn that a certain class of individuals, brothers and sisters of ours, were considered inferior by the Roman Empire, the higher social class of the time, and they saw themselves entitled to enslave other brothers and sisters of theirs. We see this in the book 2000 years later and Paul and Stephen by Emmanuel. This practice of slavery back then, when the Roman Empire conquered new lands, they gathered individuals to be their servants as slaves, and that practice was considered legitimate and socially sanctioned. Yes, beloved friends, slavery normal back then, with a lot of justifications that the Roman Empire embraced. A custom that seemed acceptable back then, today is considered barbaric. There will be a day on the earth, beloved friends, where, for example, drinking alcohol will be considered barbaric as well. How do we know? We learn that when we ingest alcohol, we interfere with our own vibratory field and we begin vibrating in a lower frequency and thus attract other minds that are in the same frequency, and also shorten or decrease our vitality. In the book Nosso Lar by André Luiz, we see that it being qualified as an indirect suicide because of social drinking. So there will be a day on the earth where social drinking will be considered barbaric, no longer socially acceptable. There will be a time when our own very customs will be even more adjusted than what they are with the divine laws. We show sacred temple, and though it is lended to us by God, it is not our legitimate property. How many of us consider our own very bodies our property? We identify ourselves with our own appearance, with the clothing that we wear, with the brands that we are able to showcase, with however in fashion. And if we lack any of those aspects of our physical appearance, physical self, we feel as though we are lacking as well. But beloved friends, our body, though sacred and a beautiful gift from God, is not our property. There will be a day when we shall have passion to God. So if we look at life from the perspective that not even our body is our legitimate property, we shall care for it as a beloved pet, according to what our friend Vanessa Anceloni always reminds us. The most beloved pet there is, but there will be a time when we will have an account for it. Right, dear soul? Welcome, beloved friend. Also, dear friends, at times we may perceive our own loved ones as our properties. We say, for instance, this is my friend, this is my daughter, this is my dog, this is my work, this is my school, this is my partner, this is my neighbor. And we forget that those are not our property. Those individuals are not our properties. They are, in fact, spirits that are as free as we are to begin or continue their journey towards God. And the relationships that we build are God has placed us in each other's lives for the purpose of learning with one another, serving others, and loving others. When we see other brothers and sisters of ours as our property, beloved friends, it is a signal that we are overwhelmed, overcome, blind. We may wonder, Carol, how do we make such claim? It is because we come to believe that either due to blood ties or to marriage or to affinity, those people have a duty with us. Those people should respect us. But God is saying, yes, be respectful, but go a step further. As Master Jesus exemplified, Master Jesus has taught us to not seek to be served, to not seek to be loved, to not seek to be imprisoned by apparent socially acceptable ties, but rather expands to the realm of being useful to others and to the realm of the universal family. We see that Master Jesus was a master in emotional detachment. How do we know? He could have said, "Oh, dear Mother, Mother Mary, Mother of mine, I shall never leave you." Because he had the mother of all mothers, Mother Mary. But Master Jesus exemplified the fact that his mother was not his property. not his legitimate property. No. How so? Because he began his mission without being concerned solely with his nuclear family. He blessed his mother, served his mother, but he made it very clear, even to his mother, that his primary role was to serve God by helping the universal family. How do we know that, friends? Because in the book Good News, we see that Master Jesus in the cross saw his mother, didn't say, "Oh, mommy, I understand your suffering, poor you." He didn't have pity. Rather, he empowered his mother by saying, "Mother, here's your son," as he pointed to John the Evangelist. And John the Evangelist, "Here's your mother." At that moment, he thought his own mother and one of his dearest, that in order to serve God, we must embrace our universal family and come to understand that literally nothing and no one is our property. That we have concessions from God and acquisitions that we come to gain because of God's love, result of God's investment in us. Our knowledge is God's investment in us. Everything that we may temporarily associate with a feeling of possession is not legitimately ours. Master Jesus exemplified this level of understanding even very cross. So, therapeutic question for all of us: how are we doing in terms of our sense of detachment? Can we measure it within our own hearts? From a scale from 0 to 10, where are we? 0 meaning no, 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 Carol, we are still in the kind of phase. Or 10, we practice looking at one another as children of God and not as ours. How are we doing in terms of that? Because a lot of our suffering, dear friends, come from the fact that we come to believe erroneously that either belong to us. When, for instance, we are mothers and we believe that our children belong to us, then we suffer when they begin their adult life. And we may spend a long time frustrated because our children did not fulfill our expectations. That's right. If we are attached, we create suffering for ourselves. Right, dear friends? Also, for instance, when we come to believe that our partners are ours, then we may come to suffer because they do not have a crystal ball to guess what we are thinking and feeling all the time, and neither does God, friends, to serve us or be our slaves. Thus, The more we detach, the more we learn to look at one another as children of God, the less suffering we experience. How so? Because in that situation, we learn to place God at the center of all our relationships. So, for us, where are we in terms of placing God at the center of our relationships? 0. We need to practice. 10. We feel that we are getting there. How do we know? How do we measure if we are placing God at the center of our relationships? For instance, when we look at we don't say to ourselves, oh, I wish they did X, Y, and Z for me. Instead, we ask, beloved God, how may I serve you today through this relationship? How would you like me to nourish this relationship? Beloved God, how can I love my family members more? Yes, Soul Souza, beautiful. It's good to think about it because at any moment we can leave this world. You're right. And without goodbye to the loved ones. Yes, Soul Souza, thank you. Right now, because of the pandemic, many of our brothers and sisters are experiencing just that. They are living without having a chance to say goodbye. So, the more we practice detaching by putting God at the center of our relationships, the more we feel at ease because we know that when a loved one transfers to the other dimension of life, God is caring for that love at ease, resigned. Why? Because we have come to understand that that loved one is a child of God and we are returning that loved one to God, the legitimate owner, legitimate creator, right? Dear soul, thank you for this beautiful reminder. All of us will graduate from the yes, indeed. So practicing to put God at the center, saying, God, how may I serve you in this relationship? God, why have you created this family constellation for me? Why have we been placed in this particular circumstance? What can I do to help you, God? Then we see that our decisions longer seek to feed our own wants and desires. We are 100% concerned with God's to-do list for us rather than our own to-do list for ourselves, beloved friends. So this is the exercise for us tonight, for us to reflect upon the fact that literally one in our lives is a beautiful concession from God, and that we have reincarnated to learn to serve God through these relationships. So let us meditate upon how we can learn to serve God through every one of our relationships. Let us practice within the next 24 hours. have God at the center of our lives and our hearts, knowing that God is the commander in chief of everyone's lives. And God, in its infinite wisdom, knows how to educate us. And when it is time for us to detach, when God thinks that we are ready, the opportunity come. This carnation, like Saul Souza has reminded us, is one such opportunity. Why not then practice for those moments of detachment right now, knowing that we don't need to be afraid of this carnation because we know that God cares for everyone we love, since no one is abandoned or forced. So let us carry this certainty in our hearts, feel God's blessings, and allow for God to guide us at all moments in our journey of self discovery in God, through God, and with God. Thank you, dear friends, for the gift of your company. Thank you for these learning opportunities that we have shared together. And with friends, wish you many blessings and invite you to stay tuned right here on Kardec Radio, because here, beloved friends, there is always more for us to nourish our souls always. A big hug to everyone, a big kiss, and until next time. Bye for now.